I want to get down to the simplest possible nitty-gritty of what we've been talking about in a very easy way. To ask ourselves the question, quite fundamentally, what's all the trouble about? In other words, what is your state of mind when you contemplate the possibility of everything becoming nothing? All right, so the universe is a transitory system, like a bubble, like smoke, like foam on the water. And so, how easy? Just go along with it, dissolve. Then what? What does that do to you when you envisage that possibility? How do you feel inside? Why do you feel that way inside? And really, you can't resist this. Even if you don't believe that that's what's going to happen, that there is some immortality principle, there is spirit or something which outlasts this change. Supposing it changes and changes and changes and changes and then stops changing altogether, because everything in the end, you know, when the television switches off, the screen goes down to a point which vanishes. Shut off. Supposing that is the conclusion of it all, and anyway, time goes by so fast, doesn't it? And the older you get, the faster it seems to go. When you're a child, time drags a good deal, seems much slower. But as you get old, you begin to read obituary notices with your contemporaries in them, and you see everything changing. You think, well, it won't be long now, after all. And it dissolves. It may be a very painful dissolution, mostly because you're resisting it. So, what's the problem? Why don't we want to give up? What do we think we're going to get by holding on and by resisting the dissolution? Now, I'm not saying at the moment that, as I'm a sort of preacher, advocating giving up. What I'm interested in, for you to feel, is what do you really feel like inside at the prospect of there being nothing, of this whole thing being a bubble that dissolves? You see, about death, the reality of approaching death, people are apt to feel chilly, cold, lonely, scared because it's an unknown. The most frightening thing about death is there might be something beyond it, and you don't know what it is. You remember facing the world as a child, or at any time. The world is full of threats, mostly from other people. And there are monsters. There are all sorts of things which scare you, but beyond every monster is death. Dissolution is the end of it all. And by and large, the art of government is to fill that void beyond death with threats of a rather unspecified nature, so that we can rule people by saying, if you don't do as I tell you, I'll kill you, or you'll kill yourself. And so long as we can be scared of that, and so long as we can be made to think of death as a bad thing, we can be ruled. And that is why no government likes mystics. Because if we define the mystic as the person who is no longer scared of death, because the mystic is, in the simplest possible language, the person who understands that you have to have nothing to have something. So you can't fundamentally scare the mystic with death. Because, say, well, what end can it all come to? What's all the trouble about? The most it can come to is nothing. I mean, there may be some troubles on the way of resisting this, basically resisting it. I mean, as you might say, the very cells in your body resist their dissolution. And so in this resistance there's an experience called pain, which we've been discussing. But beyond pain is annihilation. Or so it seems, anyway. What will it be like to go to sleep and never wake up? Nobody can think about it. Now, wait a minute. Nobody can think about it. But what is that state when you're teased out of thought? See, get with it. Going to sleep and never waking up. This is not, as you would fantasize it, a state of being in the dark forever. It is not like being buried alive, because then there's an experience of darkness. Now, I remember a little while ago having at one of my seminars a girl who was born blind. And I had the most interesting discussion with her, because she doesn't know what darkness is. The word is absolutely meaningless to her, because she's never seen light. Now, so, when you really think about nothingness, it becomes like how your head looks to your eyes. And behind the eyes you don't see darkness, do you, right now? You're not aware of a contrast of light here, black there. Behind the visual field, this way, you can't see darkness. There is simply nothing conceivable at all. Neither darkness nor light. See? All right, so, might one venture to say almost that that area of blankness we call death is what lies behind the eyes. In other words, it is what we can't think about. That's what's watching. In other words, the farthest we can go in thinking about nothing, you see, we get to the root of the matter. Let me put this in another way. The world is form. Now, you cannot look for the origin of form in form, because what you would get then would be a universe where you couldn't make out any form at all because there was so much of it. It would be like writing a letter on top of a newspaper. But one can read, one can see form, one can see the world, simply because there's always emptiness behind it. So you see, in this way, emptiness being the mother of form. And you can always say, yes, only the form is there, that's all that's real. But that is only saying it's all that is figure. What about background? It always has to be there. So let's go on then into our visualization, our imagination. Use your imagination for all it's worth to think yourself into the fact that this whole sense of importance, of vitality, of aliveness, of being is simply a sudden experience which was nothing before it started and will be nothing after it's over. That is the simplest possible thing you could believe in. It requires no intellectual effort. Nothing. Supposing that's the way it is. Now I repeat. what's your inside feeling about that? Supposing, let's say, you feel sorry. For whom is this sorrow? Who, when it's all over, will there be to feel sorry? But when it's come to an end, nobody will either regret or be happy about it. That will be that. So in a way you can say, well, this feeling of sorrow that I have that it's going to come to an end is really rather irrelevant, because let me look at the thing from the other direction. Supposing it never would come to an end. In other words, here is this alternation of joy and sorrow. And however happy I am today, I'm always going to feel miserable later on. And then maybe happy again, but then after that miserable. And this is never going to stop. I just can't get rid of the damn thing. Well, that's pretty depressing, isn't it? I mean, when you think it through. So you say, well, let's make a compromise between these two possibilities. One is that this compromise is, in other words, that it will disappear altogether, but then it'll start again. Because when it starts again, it'll feel like it does now, which is that it never happened before. So you're always in the same place, just like you feel now. Let's supposing that the Hindus are right, that the universe lasts for 4,320,000 years, and then it vanishes, and then it starts and runs for another 4,320,000 years, and then it vanishes, and it does it again. And it does it, and does it, and does it, and does it, and there is no end to this. But fortunately, because of the forgettery, every 4,320,000 years, it doesn't become a totally insufferable bore. There is this blank space, this trough between the crests of the waves. You see? Now the Hindus thought about that, and they got tired. And they thought about the possibility of moksha, liberation, or nirvana, from the everlasting cycle of appearing and disappearing. But then when they had thought that through, the Buddhists, for example, having really said, now we've got the trick. As the Buddha said after his enlightenment, now I've found you out, you who build the house. I'm going to take the house apart. The roof beam is brought down. Desire is the builder of the house. See, I've found you. Never again shall you build it. And the Buddhists thought that one over. Yes, they're crazy. We found a way out of samsara, the wheel of birth and death. And somebody one day said, but, isn't that rather selfish? You get yourself out. What about all the other people? Don't you have any feeling of compassion? Oh yes, they said, of course. We forgot that, didn't we? Let's come back again and help all these people out. And then they got very sophisticated about it, and they said, look, if nirvana is released from birth and death, then they're opposed. And so nirvana and birth and death go together, and they will have to imply one another. So you're only really released if you see that, if you see that nirvana and birth and death are the same thing. Now I'm going to pull a fast one on you. So every time an incarnation occurs, it feels like this one. See, it might be quite different. We might be reincarnated in another universe as beings of an altogether different shape. See? Not at all like human beings. But because we were used to it, we would feel that that was the human shape. We would say, well, that's natural. Obviously, that's the way things are. So naturally, if you appeared in the form of a spider, you would look around at other spiders and say, well, yes, of course, this is natural shape to be in. This is the human shape. Something that is not us looks at us and thinks we look perfectly terrible. I mean, imagine how you look to a fish. clumsy, cumbersome, stupid-looking thing, as a fish is so elegant and graceful and can slide through the water so beautifully. The human beings can't even swim properly. So don't you see that in every world that comes into being, or could come into being, it seems just like it seems now. And every species that you could belong to would seem like this one. It would have its up end of what is highly intelligent and its low end of what is not so intelligent. You would be aware of superior forces and inferior forces. Otherwise, you wouldn't have the idea of mastering a situation unless there were situations you couldn't master. Now, we are not aware of species, of beings above us, unless you cultivate those forms of psychic awareness where you think you're in touch with angels, or something of that sort. But the things that appear to be above us are great natural processes. Only we think they're rather stupid, only very tough, too strong for us. Earthquakes, the elements, also some little ones. See, the virus is a very troublesome being. And this is where a human being really finds himself at his wit's end in dealing with molecular biology. So, you know, if the monsters don't get you, the minsters will.
The insects.
The insects. You see? But at any rate, whatever level you're on, it always appears to be the same one. This one. Now, we, therefore, naturally, don't we? We feel we're in the middle. We feel, for example, with the telescope, that there is a world greater than us that is infinitely greater. We feel with the microscope there's a world below us that's infinitely smaller, and we seem to stand in the middle. Of course you seem to stand in the middle. Every creature stands in the middle, because if you stand on a boat in the middle of the ocean and you turn around through an angle of 360 degrees, you will see the same distance in every direction. That's because you see. And your sensitivity to sight or the intensity of light is the same in every direction. So you're in the middle. You're always in the middle. Where else would you be? In other words, anything that perceives anywhere is always in the middle. Anything that grows anywhere is always in the middle. It's betwixt and between. And the middle always has, therefore, extremes. It has extremes in space. As far west and as far east as you can think, as far on and as far back. And there's always a beginning, and there's always an end, just as there's a left and a right, or a top and a bottom. So, also, if you are aware of a state which you call is, or reality, or life, this implies another state called isn't, or illusion, or unreality, or nothingness, or death. There it is. You can't know one without the other. And so as to make life poignant, it's always going to come to an end. That is exactly, don't you see, what makes it lively. Liveliness is change, is motion. And motion is going like this, see? Going to fall out and be gone. So, you see, you're always at the place where you always are. Only it keeps appearing to change. And you think, wowee, a little further on we'll get that thing. I hope we don't go further down so that we lose what we already have. But that is built into every creature's situation, no matter how high, no matter how low. So, in this sense, all places are the same place. And the only time you ever notice any difference is in the moment of transition. When you go up a bit, you gain. When you go down a bit, you feel disappointed, gloomy, loss. You can go all the way down to death. Somehow, there seems to be a difficulty in getting all the way up. Death seems so final. Nothingness seems so very, very irrevocable and permanent. But then if it is, what about the nothingness that was before you started? So don't you see, what we've left out of our logic, and this is part of the game rule of the game that we're playing, is the way we hoodwink ourselves is by attributing powerlessness to nothingness and saying ex nihilo nihil fit. Nothing can come out of nothing. We don't realize that is a complete logical fallacy. On the contrary, it takes nothing to have something. Because you wouldn't know what something was without nothing. You wouldn't know what the form is without the background space. You wouldn't be able to see anything unless there were nothing behind your eyes. Now imagine yourself with a spherical eye. You can see all around. But now what's in the middle? See? Even if I have all this behind me in view, suddenly I will find that there is something in the middle of it all. There's a hole in the middle of reality. Like now, there seems to be not so much a hole but a wall, but any animal which had eyes in the back of its head would have the sensation I'm describing. Now, you may say to me, well, all that's wishful thinking. Because when you're dead, see? Now, wait a minute. What's that state of consciousness that talks in that way? This is somebody saying something who wants to make a point. Now, what point does that sort of person want to make? Like when you're dead, see? Why, that's one of the people who want to rule the world. It's to frighten you about death. Death is real, see? I mean, don't indulge in wishful thinking. All you people who dream of an afterlife and heavens and gods and mystical experiences and eternity, oh, you're just wishy-washy people. You don't face the facts. What facts? How can I face the fact of nothing, which is by definition not a fact? You see? All this is twaddle, from whichever way you look at it. So if you really go the whole way and see how you feel at the prospect of vanishing forever, of all your efforts and all your achievements and all your attainments turning into dust and nothingness, what is the feeling? What happens to you? It's a curious thing that in the world's poetry, this is a very common theme. The earthly hope men set their hearts upon turns ashes, or it prospers, and anon, like snow upon the desert's dusty face, lighting a little hour or two, is gone. All kinds of poetry emphasizes the theme of transience. And there's a kind of nostalgic beauty to it. A banquet hall deserted. After the revelry, all the guests had left and gone their ways. And the table with overturned glasses, crumpled napkins, breadcrumbs, and dirty knives and forks lies empty. And the laughter echoes only in one's mind. And then the echo goes. The memory, the traces are all gone. That's the end, you see. Do you see, in a way, how that is saying the most real state is the state of nothing? That's what it's going to all come to. With these physicists who think of the energy of the universe running down, dissipating in radiation, gradually, until there's nothing at all left. And for some reason or other, we're supposed to find this depressing. But if somebody is going to argue that the basic reality is nothingness, where does all this come from? Obviously from nothingness. Once again, you get how it looks behind your eyes, see? So cheer up, you see. This is what is meant in Buddhist philosophy by saying we are all basically nothing. When the sixth patriarch says the essence of your mind, that's how it is behind your eyes, is intrinsically pure. The pure doesn't mean a non-dirty story state of mind, as it is apt to mean in the word Puritan. Pure means clear, void. So you know the story when the sixth patriarch was given his office as successor because he was truly enlightened. There was a poetry contest. And the losing one wrote the idea that the mind, the consciousness, was like a mirror which had to be polished. And constantly I have to polish my mirror. I have to purify my mind, see? So that I'm detached and calm and clear-headed and, Buddha'd. But the one who won the contest said, there is no mirror. And the nature of the mind is intrinsically void, so where is there anywhere for dust to collect? See? So in this way, by seeing that nothingness is the fundamental reality, and you see it's your reality, then how can anything contaminate you? All the idea of your being scared and put out and worried and so on is just nothing. It's a dream, because you're really nothing. But this is the most incredible nothing. And the sixth patriarch likewise went on to contrast emptiness of indifference, which is sort of blank emptiness. If you think of this nothingness as mere blankness, and you hold on to the idea of blankness, you haven't understood it. He said nothingness is really like the nothingness of space, which contains the whole universe. All the sun, moon, and stars, and the mountains and rivers, and the good men and the bad men, and the animals and the insects, the whole bit, all are contained in void. So out of this void comes everything, and you're it. What else could you be? See, so what I'm showing you is that all this hocus pocus about the fear of nothingness is, truly speaking, nothingness is what we want to talk about when we talk about the spiritual. Only it's all been ignored. It's all been put down. And say, oh, nothingness. Bleh! Heaven preserve us from that. But that's where the secret lies. And obviously the secret always lies in the place you never think of looking for it. In mythology, this comes again and again. Okay, this is Christmas. Where is the Christ born? In a palace? No, where no one would think of looking. in pigsty. Although, I have a Japanese friend who once said to me, he said, you know, the real difference between Christianity and Buddhism is that Christ was the son of a carpenter and Buddha the son of a prince. I thought that was rather funny. Well, we don't know who the prince is without the carpenter, do we? Now, it's in that sense, really, that I could suggest to you that you meditate on nothingness. I know you can't think about it. But yet, when it becomes perfectly clear to you that that's what you are, and what you were before you were born, where can anybody stick a knife into you? Fundamentally, you see? All right. Get it, because this is really the secret of the whole thing. If you see that, now we want to go on and be able to answer all the people who will come and bug us about it. Because whether you say anything about it to other people or not, people are going to bug you about this. And say, oh, no. You really are something. You know, you'll know it. Ooh, wowee. You know, the life isn't the way you think. It's going to be awful. See? It's going to be real. Ooh. And they'll say, oh, you can. Where in such a philosophy as this is there any basis for the love of one's fellow men? For joy in children? For cultivating gardens? For doing this and that and the other? See? Well, I say, there is no basis in it. That's the same way there is no basis in emptiness for form, or so it seems. But only precisely to the degree that you have discovered the nothingness that you are, you find you're suddenly full of energy. That is energy. It's the source and origin of energy. So that when, you know, there's sort of nothing in your way, then you can do exactly what I was describing as having this glee for going into doing this, that, and the other thing, and being thoroughly creative. But you can't be creative out of just plain somethingness. You need nothingness to be creative. And that's what we are. And this too is real nothingness. And I'm saying it's not darkness. It's not like being buried alive forever. It's not like rest. Even when the Catholics sing, rest eternal grant unto them, O Lord, and let light perpetual shine upon them. This isn't rest, because it isn't motion. Neither motion nor rest. What is it? Nobody can imagine. And it's at that point, you see, where the imagination completely runs out and stops. There we've hit the thing. See, there you are, right at the fundamental mystical reality. Now, what this is we're talking about is what mystics have quite often discussed, only this isn't read very much. It's a state called agnosia, which means unknowing. There's a book called The Cloud of Unknowing, written by an English monk in the 14th century, but it's based on another book called Theologia Mystica, which was written in the 6th century, by an unknown Syrian monk who used the name of Dionysius the Areopagite. It's absolutely fascinating, very short little book, which I translated long ago, back in 1943, and I'm about to reissue it. Anyone who subscribes to the journal will get it, with a new introduction altogether, because I've rethought the whole thing. But this book ends up with a description of God, which is all in negatives. Not any kind of anything you can imagine at all. Not light, not power, not spirit, not fatherhood, not sonship, not this, that, and the other, all the way down the line. Everything that anybody's ever said or thought about God is denied, because God is infinite and therefore beyond the reach of any conception at all. So he says that anybody who, having a vision, thought he saw God, would not have seen God, but some creature that God has made that is less than God. So again, you approach in a Christian context, said in such a way that even St. Thomas Aquinas bought it, that you can't impute heresy to it, because everybody's got to agree that God is the which than which there is no whicher, and this guy spells it out. So in the same way you get Nagarjuna saying that the ultimate reality is Shunyata, voidness. So Shankara gets at it, where he says that which is the knower or the knowing in everything can never itself be an object of its own knowledge, for fire doesn't burn itself, although it burns other things. So we never know what the Brahman is, just like the eyes don't ever see the head. If you put something there, you are stopping short of nothing, and you don't get the whole benefit of it, that's all. If you insist that there is something there, that there is the loving Father at the end of the line, or the paradise garden, you are really cheating yourself. Because it's only when you have thorough emptiness and real downright nothingness at the end of the line that you get the full impact. No holes. Look, Mama, no hands. See? Now, I really think that's the simplest thing I can possibly tell you. I really don't know what else there is to be said about this whole Zen project or mysticism, Vedanta, what have you. It comes down to that, and there are infinitely many ways of evading. But what I'm trying to point out to you, you see, is the way in which you see the point by taking the line of least resistance, by facing the facts, by not super adding to truth something you contribute to it, your own business that you put up, but saying, if I follow what I conceive or can see with my senses to be reality, as far as we can look, it seems that this is sort of the inevitable conclusion, which everybody has spent endless effort in arguing about and resisting, not realizing that if they went the whole way, how splendid it would be. And that's all you have to do.